Hello everybody and welcome back. Thank you for joining me. Tonight I have some reports from Malaysia for you. Now, as you know, when you're in this community, you tend to meet people from all across the world. And one of my friends, Roger, out there, has sent me a number of newspaper reports that I'm going to be bringing to you over the next few months. And I'd like to put them out in a format called Roger's Reports. So tonight, to Roger, thank you very much for sending these in. I'd like to share them with you all. And as I said, the reports come from Malaysia, and they are described as Malaysian hairy men, half human, half apes, with fanged-like teeth, and cannibalistic, and they terrify the villagers. So, Kuala Lumpur, 3 hairy fanged creatures, 1 female and 2 male, who appeared to be half human and half ape, emerged from the edges of a 150-mile tract of dense jungle in northern Malaya on Christmas Day, and frightened rubber tappers. Radio Malaya reported this in an exclusive broadcast. The deputy director of one of the plantations out there, Tomini Beamish, made a broadcast from his rubber plantation on the edges of the vast Trolak Forest Reserve in Perak State, and that's in northwestern Malaya. He said there were unknown creatures that had been reported by a number of his rubber tappers who were out on the plantation, and he actually spoke to them on radio live, and he said the jungle here goes 150 miles across the mountains to the sea, and no one knows what goes on in there. I'm sure this is one of the most valuable anthropological discoveries for centuries. The handful of people who saw the creatures described them as tall, powerfully built, and covered in hair, with unkempt hair from their heads hanging down to their waists. All of them had long dog-like fangs, which could still be seen when they had the mouths open, so almost canine, I would imagine, canine teeth. Both men and women had moustaches, and all were said to have an unusual smell. The first to see the creatures was a young Chinese girl, and she was rubber tapping. And she was on the outskirts of the rubber plantation, and she was surprised when she seen all of the creatures. She came running back to her village in hysterics. And when the plantation manager, Mr. Sam Brown, finally got her story straightened out, he sent home guardsmen through the plantation on patrol. Now, Corporal Wahib found 3 creatures on the banks of the river, digging for tapioca with their hands. One of the creatures, who was a male, dived into the river and hid under some overhanging scrub. On the following day, a Malay child playing by the river saw the creatures again, and they were all swimming. The child ran back to the village and sobbed out her story. On December the 27th, a Tamil tapper on the plantation felt a pair of women's arms go around him while he was bending over the bole of a rubber tree. He turned and saw the hideous fanged face of the female and her 2 companions, and smelt their animal odour. He burst clear of them. His shirt was ripped, and he fell down the bank as he ran and landed in the water. Now, the last he saw of the creatures as he ran away, they were standing around and appeared to be laughing heartily at him. Mr. Beamish said in the radio broadcast that he had spoken to all 3 of the witnesses, and they'd given their accounts on the radio in their own language. The only point of difference was the rudimentary clothes the creatures were said to be wearing. Some said that they had bark loincloths. Others spoke of skin loincloth or animal skins. All natives and European settlers in the region are positive that the creatures exist, and say that as they seem to be quite young, there are probably colonies of them back in the jungle, which in places is described as impenetrable. Mr. Beamish said that he believed that a colony of the strange creatures might have been forced from its jungle home due to the number of floods recently. They may be starved and displaced, he said, and they've wandered on out into the fringing rubber plantations that they wouldn't have even known were there, and they were probably as surprised to see the tappers as the tappers were to see them. I do not think they mean harm, and they should be protected, Mr. Beamish said. Now, the authorities in Kuala Lumpur and Singapore said that they could not identify the strange beings. Now, there are legends of Malayan, hairy type Aboriginal ape men who lived in the mountain jungles, and that's something I can do looking into. Or if you're out there and you like to look up things online, can you find out anything on these stories for me? Because there is a follow-up to it. I'm going to read that now. But it would be interesting to know if there are any photographs out there or any different newspaper reports, because you tend to find that after the first report is made, it starts to get, depending on how many sources it goes through, it starts to get watered down or changed. And then you've got the translation of language. So the very first report that come in are probably what we would call the gold mine of report, and after that, each time it's told, it could be years between tellings or months between tellings, and certain little things change, and as the years go on in newspaper reports, it all tends to get smudged into a muchness, if you kind of get what I mean. So if you know anything about these stories, and because I know that we have got members and people who are interested in the subject out in these areas as we speak, or have worked in these areas, or let me know, and we'll see what we can put together. Now, as I say, there was a follow-up to the story. It says Malay's mysterious hairy ape man who frightened jungle dwellers last Christmas had been reported again. This time they were said to be carried off and were seen to be eating 2 Aborigines. Now, the creatures stated by people claiming to be eyewitnesses are said to be half human. They have long fangs and matted hair, and they appear from time to time in local headlines, if not in the jungle. Last Christmas, it said that they thought the ape man might have been Australian soldiers who, after being cut off by the Japanese, had gone native. And they didn't realise that the war was over and they were just out there in the jungles. But in the latest reports, a government observer was told by a Samal Aborigine headsman that 2 male ape men carried off 2 tribesmen near this, I think it's a Slim River in northern Malaya. There's a little bit of bleed on the newspaper report, so I can't be 100% on what that river is. Now, the headman said the Aborigines paid a visit to the communal village, and he said that he thought that the villagers were stricken with fear. The Aborigines followed the ape men's tracks through precipitous country. So what I can understand from that is the ape men arrived at the village and carried off 2 of the Aborigines, and the people that lived in the village followed after the ape man by following the tracks. After tracking them 26 miles, they found the castaway remains of a half-eaten body of one of the victims. I'm sorry, it's a really old newspaper report, so I'm struggling to read it. There were very deep fang marks all over the bodies. They were pressed further up a river and came across a macabre scene. According to the headsman, the Aborigines saw 2 more ape men, both men, devouring the second Aborigine with gusto. So one was left at one part of the river, and as the search parties carried on, they come across 2 other Aborigines, as they're calling them, eating the second tribesman. Now, the can't get that one out, can I, tonight? Let's start again. The Aborigines were so enraged, they said that the headman, that they attacked the beast and killed one of them. The observer said that is often the case in such stories. The Aborigines were not able to say in what way they disposed of the ape man's body, nor did they say what happened to the other ape man. The protector of the Aborigines in Kuala Lumpur, Mr. Q Noon, said he could hardly believe that such an incident could have occurred recently. He said stories of 2 similar nature were legion in the Aboriginal department in the past, but no one, or has ever been substantiated, but lots of people come forward and make the reports. So, do you know anything about these reports? Have you read them before in the newspapers, or is it something that you've researched into? If it is, get in touch and let me know. And you never know, you might have your own report segment on Deborah Hatswell's YouTube channel, because there's quite a few people that have been sending me in things, and it's absolutely amazing because it's not something I can do myself. So to be able to read them out and share with you is kind of an honour. It's a pleasure for me to be able to do that. So until next time, thank you all very much for joining me, and I'll see you all next week. Good night.